a former 3-time MLB All Star, and a current analyst at the MLB Network, Dan Plesac.
Jason, if you want to do this again, postseason edition, you have my number. You call me, we'll get that done.
He said it back in July, and we're here again for the third edition of Monday Madness, except on a Tuesday here after Game 1 of both the ALCS and the NLCS, and to talk about what a crazy week of baseball it was, and to preview what could happen in the championship series. You know who we're bringing on, Dan Plesac of the MLB Network. Dan, thanks so much for coming on.
Chase, it's glad to be with you. You took me up on my offer in July when we met at Bruce Beck's camp, and you know what? This has been a pretty cool weekly thing to do. Crazy baseball here in the Northeast, particularly in the Big Apple with the Mets and Yankees playing so well.
Really has been. And to have two New York teams and one Los Angeles team, I think the MLB is loving this right now. Do you think that, though, it's kind of bad for baseball in a sense? Like, I know the markets are great, but last year we saw the Texas Rangers and the Arizona Diamondbacks, like these two wild card, like forgotten teams get there. And now we have some of the most marketable brands in the Final Four. Do you feel that's bad for the game or good?
I think it's good, Chase, and I'll tell you why. Let's go back to 2015 Royals Mets. The Mets, there has to be a good team. There has to be a villain, right? I think the ultimate matchup for TV to pique interest would be Yankees Dodgers. You'd have Judge, you'd have Stanton, you'd have Ohtani, Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts. That would be a bonanza for TV ratings. The issue that you have sometimes, I get what you're saying, like to have some of these nondescript teams make it in, Milwaukee, Cleveland, Texas, Arizona. The problem with that is the casual fan that tunes in to watch the World Series doesn't have a whole lot of familiarity with the teams. You go back last year, you go to the Diamondbacks, you go to the Rangers, and there really wasn't that household name guy on the Diamondbacks that you said, hey, I want to watch this guy pitch. I want to watch this guy hit. Now, when you're talking Ohtani, you're talking Francisco Lindor, you're talking Judge, you're talking Stanton, you're talking Garrett Cole. Those marquee names get attention. So for TV, an ideal World Series would be Yankees Dodgers. But I'm one of the small minority at MLB. We were talking about this last night, me, Greg Amsinger, and Harold Reynolds. They don't want a Big Apple World Series. I do. I just think it would be really cool. But then I talked to people last night at MLB and said the last time the Subway Series, it didn't rate all that well nationally. But, man, I'm going to tell you something. You're talking about in the Northeast, ideally would be Yankees Dodgers. Second best to me would be Mets Yankees.
But that's what happens when you have so many good markets is, like, no matter what you get, you're getting two of the most marketable brands. I mean, the Mets have had their moments that have been good and bad over the past 40 years, I guess you can say, but they're still in that New York market. I think the Yankees are the most recognizable brand. And then the Dodgers, you look at the global popularity there with Shohei Ohtani, and then just how good they've been over the past few years. Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman. Absolutely. I'm kind of hoping that Cleveland gets in because it's like they're the one team everyone's forgetting about when we're mentioning all of this. So it'll be interesting. Cleveland wasn't a team you were high on, but yet they were able to sneak through Detroit. Was that more Detroit not living up to expectations? We saw Skubal disappoint in the final game, or was that just more Cleveland being able to get it done?
Okay, I think what you've seen in the Tigers-Guardians series, and we saw last night in Game 1, Yankees-Guardians. Okay, these teams don't have the depth, okay? The Tigers, the Guardians, they don't have the depth. The Guardians are fortunate tonight. They're going to their ace, Tanner Bybee. But once you get by Bybee, it's just a collection of taking a shot, a bullpen game. Alex Cobb last night, who hasn't pitched that much, gave them 2 innings. And you look what happens in these series. Eventually, if you go to that bullpen, you're going to have a bullpen game. It works once in a while. You've got your good hitters are facing a different pitcher every time. But in that chain, that link of guys, all it takes is one guy not to have a good day, and the game gets out of hand. You go back to last night. The Guardians had to bring in a young lefty. He had only pitched in 11 big league games. What does he do? He threw 2 wild pitches. This is a guy that really hadn't had much experience, and it was only his 3rd game ever pitching in relief. Then you go to the flip side and you look at the Yankees, you look at the Dodgers, you look at what the Dodgers have in that bullpen. They have established veteran guys. You're looking at Banda and Daniel Hudson and Michael Kopech. And the Yankees have the same thing right now. Luke Weaver settled down the ninth inning. Now Clay Holmes is throwing great. Tommy Canley's been throwing great. You've got Cole Hamels on the mound tonight.
Right.
It's awful hard when you have to hope that four pitchers can contain the Yankees when the Yankees are run. Let's put it this way. The Guardians are going to have a much more difficult time containing the Yankees than the Yankees are containing the Guardians. The Guardians have one legitimate home run threat, and that's Jose Ramirez. But the rest of that lineup, they play small ball. They put the ball in play. The problem is, Chase, it's hard to bunch 3 or 4 hits together in an inning and score runs against good pitching. That's why, I would say this. I wasn't high on Milwaukee. I wasn't high on the Guardians going in. I wasn't surprised that the Mets got through the Guardians, and I wasn't surprised the Guardians got by the Tigers. But I will be stunned, shocked, flabbergasted if the Guardians make this even a 6-game series. I think if the Yankees win tonight, game 2, the Guardians may win 1 game, but I think the Yankees will win this in 5.
We're going to break down exactly what the keys are and just really break down that series between Cleveland and New York. I want to talk about Detroit, though. What a Cinderella run. You trade Jack Flaherty. Even Tarek Skubal is on the trade block with Detroit thinking they're going to want a more build for the future. We saw the whole Jackson Holiday for Tarek Skubal rumors between Detroit and Baltimore, which seemed to be getting really close to a done deal until that just didn't really happen. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens with the Guardians, but I really want to talk about the Tigers and then also the Royals, who lost to the Yankees, right? The Yankees and Guardians seem like the more deep, better overall teams. I think that's why they got through those series. But out of Kansas City and Detroit, which team did you see more from in this postseason to make you think that they'll be a contender for years to come?
Kansas City Royals, because quite honestly, I think they have better players. If it weren't for Judge and Ohtani, we'd be talking about Bobby Witt Jr. for the AL Most Valuable Player. He's one of the best young players in baseball, something the Royals don't normally do. They've never done. They locked him up to a multi-year deal for over $280 million. So anytime you have a guy like Bobby Witt, and I think what's going to help the Royals, I really like what they did. They brought in Seth Lugo, they brought in Michael Wacha, and that complemented Cole Reagans, Brady Singer, and all of a sudden the Royals staff looked like it was a really good staff. But listen, the Yankees had to work to get by the Royals. But if you're asking me right now, if you could tell me right now that Spencer Torkelson will be the player in 2025 that he was at the end of the year in 2023, he had a very up and down year, but he was really good in that series against the Guardians. I don't know if the Tigers have enough offense the way they're constructed right now. I'm a big fan of Riley Green. I think he's a terrific player. Think about this. The Tigers went on this extended run, and their most expensive player hadn't played in like 2 months, Javi Baez. So think about that. They have a very small payroll. They started playing well when their most expensive player was on the sidelines with an injury, spent the last 2 months on the IL. I just think the Royals could be a dangerous team. I think that AL Central, it could go so many ways next year, with the exception of the White Sox. I think the Guardians, they've always got good young pitching. The Guardians will be better next year. You would assume Bivey's going to be better next year. Ben Lively had a good year. He was just added to the roster today because Alex Cobb was taken off the roster. But if I'm looking at the two teams, I'm more excited for the Royals going into 2025 than I am either the Guardians or the Tigers. I think the Royals now, if I'm a free agent right now and I look at what the Royals have and what they're due, it'd be intriguing for me if I was an everyday player to get a chance to play with Sal Perez, Bobby Witt Jr. I think the Royals are going in the right direction, and they're in the right division, Chase, that it's not going to take a whole lot of tinkering for them to be right in the mix next year.
Yeah, Kansas City, I believe, was more consistent than Detroit, and I can understand why you have more trust and confidence in them and their crew more than Detroit. I think you mentioned the free agent destination. I think that's what Baltimore really didn't capitalize on. When they were that 83-win team in 2022 with that surprising roster, you had all this young talent. You brought up Gunnar Henderson late in August. Like, this team was surging in the right direction. Now they've already reached that level where you're like, okay, now there are expectations. But I'm surprised Baltimore didn't really go after free agents. I think you blame the ownership, obviously, now a new ownership group. But if Kansas City could take advantage of that, that would be huge. You mentioned Seth Lugo and Cole Reagans. Both are Gold Glove finalists. Someone who was not, though, Francisco Lindor. We have a comment from the Heiserman family. Speaking of the Mets, thoughts on Lindor not being a Gold Glove finalist?
Surprising, shocking. The way that we grade players now, right? There's so many different ways with analytics that we can look at players. How about Iglesias for the Mets, right? This guy basically for 2 years couldn't find a big league job because the metrics and the analytics said he wasn't a good defender, didn't have a lot of range. And so the industry looked at Iglesias as like, well, you know what? He may be like a fourth infielder. He's a good insurance policy in AAA. I think the industry looked at him more like a 4A player, right? What's a 4A player? That's a guy that's too good to be in AAA, but not to be good enough on the big league roster. Listen, I think what we're seeing in this postseason, teams that can put the ball in play, you have to have power, but you have to be able to balance the analytics with baseball acumen that goes into it. And there are a lot of good players that are out there that aren't getting a chance to play because whether it's swing angle, it's launch angle, it's spin rate, whatever you want to do. But I just know this. I know that there's a lot of players that are very important to their teams that maybe don't like grade out. And I think when you look at Francisco Lindor, I don't know how he's not in it. He's made every play the last 2 months of the season. I get it, the offensive part, but the offense does play a big part in the Gold Glove because there have been a lot of guys that have won Gold Gloves. I'll give you an example. One of your favorite teams, there was a while there where Rafael Palmeiro had a stranglehold on the Gold Glove. And I'm not sure he was the best first baseman, but he could hit 35 to 40 home runs. He played on the right team in the right market. I think the slow start for Lindor really hindered him in a lot of ways and was really cool. When you look at Lindor, he's had some back issues now the last 5 to 6 weeks. He's found a way to get out there and play. Chase, he makes all the plays. He makes the routine play. He can make the great play. And if he gets to a ball, he's a pretty accurate thrower. Now, if you're talking about accurate throwers, there's nobody in baseball that's a better accurate thrower than Manny Machado at third base. The guy throws a strike every time. But Lindor's defense has gotten overlooked because that bat's carried him. He's a terrific player, and the Mets wouldn't have sniffed the postseason without him. And I think he's getting snubbed for the Gold Glove.
I completely agree. I think Francisco Lindor, there's a reason why he's going to finish probably top 3, at least top 5 in NL MVP voting. Just the impact that he made on that Mets team. I get they have a lot of talented players, but there was a conversation for a while, right? Who is really that best player? Pete Alonso had some talk. Brandon Nimmo had a hot stretch in May. And all of a sudden, I think Francisco Lindor really stepped up and became that leader. And I think it really showed here in that final stretch. The team that they were able to beat to get to the NLCS, the Philadelphia Phillies. I had them winning the World Series. You had them winning the World Series. You did not want to jump off that train at all. You had been on them since July. In fact, this is the first episode now where you can't pick the Philadelphia Phillies to win it all. So is this the end of the window or the opportunity for Philadelphia? Because now all of a sudden you lose the World Series, you're losing the championship series, now the divisional series, and it feels like not only is progress not being made, but you're actually going in the wrong direction with a core that maybe can't stay together as long as we would hope.
I don't want to give you an honest answer, but I'm going to give you an honest answer. I think their window is come and gone. I thought in 2023, when they had the Diamondbacks down 3-2, they went back for game 6 and 7 in Citizens Bank Park. They had momentum. They had the mojo. They had a crazy fan base. Everyone was shocked, myself included, that the Diamondbacks beat them in 6 and 7 to get to the World Series. Chase, I guess if I open my eyes, and I'm being really honest, I gave this team a pass in August and September. They had a big lead over the Braves, and I thought, okay, they don't have much to play for. The Braves aren't catching them. The Mets aren't catching them. The rotation is solid. They're going to be the team to beat. I firmly believe this. The Phillies lost the series to the Mets in the 8th inning in game 1. Zach Wheeler was as good as you could be for 7 innings. He shut down a high. Listen, you can say what you want. I know the Mets are a great story and everything. Don't take the Mets serious because they've got a shot to beat the Dodgers. I think they're beating the Dodgers in 6. I really do.
Wow.
That was that 8th inning. You had 2 all-star relievers, right? And Hoffman and Strong. That the knock on the Phillies the last 5 years has been, but the bullpen. Will Alvarado throw strikes? Will Kimbrel throw strikes? The answer for the last 2 years was no. So this was the one postseason that the Phillies looked locked and loaded. They acquired Estevez at the trade deadline from the
Got
Angels.
rid of
So
Kimbrel in the offseason, Soto,
bingo.
all those guys.
Bingo. So all of a sudden now you need a big start in game one. You get one from Wheeler. You go to Hoffman. He was terrible. You bring in Strom. He threw gas on the fire. They lose game one. And I felt right there, the demons of the Phillies bullpen reared its head again. The fan base, the media was like, here we go again. The bullpen's going to cost us. And Chase, it eventually did. They couldn't hold the Mets down. And the Mets don't have a very good bullpen. Listen, that game 2 against the Dodgers, it was 6-3, and Maton got a big double play ball. They don't turn that double play ball, and the Dodgers score a run or two, get that to 6-5. I don't know if the Mets hang on and win. You go to the 9th inning, Diaz comes in, base hit and a walk. All of a sudden, the Dodgers, and then all of a sudden, Diaz went out of body and started throwing 99 to 100 with an electric slider. I think the Phillies window is closed, and this is why. I don't know again if going into next September, if you could tell me you had a crystal ball that Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, Ranger Suarez, Christopher Sanchez were going to be healthy, I'd say I'm with the Phillies again. But that very rarely happens. It happened in 2023. Their starters were magnificent, and it happened again this year where their starters were healthy and throwing well, and they couldn't get it done. I'll tell you what I didn't like about the Phillies. They were exposed. Way too much swing and miss in that lineup, swinging at breaking balls out of the dirt. Trey Turner had a lousy series. JT Realmuto was a non-factor. He's not getting any younger. Unless they can bring an infusion of another player or change the way they go about doing things offensively, they're probably going to win the East. But you would think Austin Riley is going to be healthy next year. I don't know if Max, right? So if you'd ask me right now, the Braves are the favorite, but you'd have to think the Phillies are a playoff team. But I think the mystique is gone. You know, the Phillies were like that big kid in school, that bully that pushes people around. Well, guess what? They got punched in the jaw in 2023, and the Mets threw a bunch of haymakers and knocked them down. I thought in 2023, teams were a little intimidated to play the Phillies and go to Philadelphia. I don't think that's the case anymore. I really don't. I think the mystique is gone, and unless they make some changes, I think they'll be good, but I don't think they'll win it all.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, right? Like when you see these surging teams, you see these teams all of a sudden make a playoff run. And I think the rest of the league is like, oh boy, maybe we should be scared of them. But when you see a continuous pattern now of the team just not being able to get it done, you're right. I think the fear has kind of lowered when you go against Philadelphia Phillies and the confidence has risen. I think you could beat the Philadelphia Phillies. We've seen that in many series. The Mets did it. Now they're moving on to the National League Championship Series. Cannot believe that we're saying that after this team was 0-5, 11 games below 500, I believe it was at one point. This was just not a good team, and now they're in the NLCS. The series is tied at 1-1. However, we did see a really rough outing in Game 1, a 9-0 win from the Los Angeles Dodgers. Do you think that there could be games where the Mets are simply, I know you said you think they're going to win the series, but do you think there are times where the Mets are simply outmatched against Los Angeles?
Absolutely not. No, because you know what? Of the 4 teams that are left playing, Mets have the best starting pitching. They just do, flat out. I'm just going to be what happened in Game 1. Kodai Senga just couldn't throw strikes. Now he probably wasn't going to be around for more than a couple innings anyway. I think he gave them a false sense of hope when he had the 2-inning stint against the Phillies. He gave up the leadoff home run to Kyle Schwarber. Let me ask you this. Nobody runs 4 starters out right now. The Dodgers starting pitching is a mess. I think we'll both agree. They don't know what they're going to get from Walker Buehler in Game 3. Clayton Kershaw, non-factor. Tyler Glasnow, non-factor. What are they going to get from Yamamoto? I don't know. He's had shoulder problems all year. Quintana, throwing the ball great. Sean Manaea, throwing the ball great. Luis Severino, throwing the ball great. Then they've got David Peterson, who now they can put him back in the rotation if they want to start him. The Mets starting pitching is far, far superior to the Dodgers. With that said, the Dodgers bullpen is far, far superior to the Mets bullpen. That's why I think it's an interesting series. Mets way better starting pitching, Dodgers way better bullpen.
You there?
Yep.
Sorry, I think I lost you there. Would you mind just finishing that last point?
I think that the Mets and Dodgers, the Mets have a far superior starting pitching. Dodgers far superior bullpen. I think that's what makes this a series that's so intriguing. Dodgers starting pitching in shambles. They don't know what they're going to get from Yamamoto or Walker Buehler in game 3 tomorrow night. It's going to probably be a bullpen game again. And eventually it's going to catch up to the Dodgers. That bullpen was so good in game 4 and game 5 against the Padres. I don't know if they can do that again. Everyone just thinks, hey, they went through a bullpen game. They had 33 scoreless innings. Guess what? Mark Vientos said, the hell with that 33 innings. That game got out of hand early. You better take the Mets for real. And I know there's a lot of Yankee fans that follow you and watch you, but I'm telling you, this Mets team is for real. They can hit. They have mojo. Going into game 1, 4-0 in games that they fell behind early. That was the first game they fell behind and they lost. They get a lead. They're tough to get. This is the problem if you're a Mets fan. Whether it's the 6th inning, the 7th inning, or the 8th inning, if it's a relatively close game, you don't know what you're going to get from Maton. You know what you're going to get from Stanek. He's going to throw strikes. But Diaz, to me, he's a high wire act. He could be really good like he was with 2 guys on in the 9th, but he can also give you a heart attack.
That series will continue. We head back to New York, and it's going to be very interesting to see how that goes. We're going to move over to the American League, right? New York beats Kansas City, but I don't think they did it the way that they wanted to. I think it looked ugly at times. We saw Aaron Judge a really cold start to the series, a tough game 1, though they were able to get by. So I don't think the Yankees played the way that they wanted to play, but yet they still moved on. Do you believe that the Yankees were partially exposed, considering they really struggled with a Kansas City team that just didn't appear to be ready?
No, not at all. The Kansas City team was ready. They're a better team than people give them credit for. With the Yankees, Garrett Cole wasn't particularly good in game 1. He was brilliant in his second one. Judge is eventually going to get hot. Giancarlo Stanton has been a godsend. He's been their best player in the postseason. They've literally got nothing from Chisholm. They've got nothing from Judge. They haven't gotten anything from Wells. But they're not a one musician band, right? They've got a guy named Juan Soto. So you can pitch around Judge, but you're going to have to pitch to Soto. The key for the Yankees for me is this. They're going to have to find somebody. And I don't know if that's moving Stanton from the 5 spot to the 4 spot. They're going to have to put somebody behind Judge to give him protection because Judge gives Soto protection. Soto hitting 3rd, Judge hitting 4th. Man, you pick your poison. But when you've got Wells hitting 5th, you've got different guys hitting 5th, Judge isn't going to get very many good pitches to hit. That's why I wouldn't be shocked if they move Stanton to 5th to give Judge some protection, or they may just like to keep it the way it is because they're winning, but sooner or later they've got to get Judge involved.
A team that I was a little shocked to see get eliminated, and I think I would have been shocked if the Dodgers would have got eliminated as well, but I think the San Diego Padres were on a lot of people's radar as a team that could win the World Series. You mentioned back in July the moves they made at the trade deadline, and they worked. And all of a sudden, this team just started to get hot. They were a lot of people's World Series pick. I thought at one point that they could have been a team to go all the way. I had them in my NLCS. It just didn't work. They go 24 consecutive innings without scoring to close out the series. What was the problem? Like, it seemed things were going well, and then it just stopped. What was the disconnect in San Diego?
Real simple, Chase. They poked the bear. They had the Dodgers down. They were hooping and celebrating and dancing in the outfield, giving a hard time to the Dodgers fans. Manny Machado rolled the ball towards the Dodger dugout. They had the Dodgers down, and they kind of started rubbing it in a little bit. And I think what Dave Roberts did, he rallied the troops in game 4 and said, listen, we're not going down like this. We're going to win this game. And when they won game 4, I was probably the only analyst at MLB Network. I didn't see them losing game 5 because as game 4 went on, you started to see that look on TV when they did those ISO shots, and you looked at Jackson Merrill, you looked at Profar, you looked at Machado, you looked at Tatis Jr. They had this all of a sudden. It wasn't the joking and laughing and dancing and having fun and hey, all of a sudden it was blank look like, oh no, like they thought they were going to win that 4th game. They thought that series was over. And then I thought when it got to the 5th game, they were done. They weren't beating the Dodgers in Game 5. I was surprised, to be honest with you. I thought the Mets would get Game 1 because I thought, man, the Dodgers would have to have somewhat of a letdown after that emotional 5 games with the Padres. Maybe, just maybe, the Mets would sneak in Game 1 and like score early and kind of, win Game 1. When the Dodgers spanked the Mets in Game 1, I was a little concerned. But when the Mets scored the 6 runs, I'm telling you, Chase, I don't know what's going to happen, but I think it's going to be a 6 or 7 game series. If you don't believe these Mets are for real, you better start believing, because I think the cool part about the Mets is, you know why they're so fun to watch? They're not the perfect team, right? Pete Alonso at first, he'll make some plays and he's going to botch some plays. Vientos at third base, he can hit, but he's not a solid defender. You look at the outfield, Nimmo's not your prototypical smooth-looking player, right? But what they do is they find a way to win. Chase, when they won the day after the season was over, they won that crazy game in Atlanta. There aren't many teams that can have a lead and see that lead go away, and Lindor comes back and hits a 2-run homer and gives them the lead. That was a sign to me. They showed us a sign in Milwaukee when they won Game 5 on the road, when Alonso did what nobody thought could do, get to Devin Williams. Believe in the Mets. I'm telling you. I'm not saying they're going to win the series. I'm picking them to win the series, but this is going 6 or 7. They're good.
What is the stat? I think it's the last 8 or 9 teams to beat Milwaukee move on to the World Series, something along those lines. And hey, maybe Milwaukee's just been a tough test in the past, but yeah, this Mets team is incredible, and that's why I'm excited to see how Game 3 looks. We saw the Dodgers dominate in Game 1. We saw the Mets play really well in Game 2. Let's see if it's an even game in Game 3, like who has the advantage now as we head to Citi Field. I think
Correct.
That's key. You move on to the other side of New York, and you look at the Yankees, and you look at Game 2, really tough Game 1 matchup, and you just talked about it, against the Cleveland Guardians. They are clearly, I believe, underdogs
They are.
in the series. They're not as deep. The Yankees just are playing amazing baseball right now. And you're right, Judge will get it going, and it's no longer a one-man show. They got other pieces, and they're really stepping up, like Giancarlo Stanton, as you mentioned.
They are.
What do the Yankees have to do to make sure they don't blow this? I'm sure this fan base right now is very happy, but also just looking to the past and feeling a little scared about what could transpire over the next few days. What do the Yankees need to do to make sure that this series doesn't get anywhere near Cleveland, possibly?
Win Game 2. They win Game 2 tonight. This series is over. There's no way that they're going to lose 2 out of 3 games in Cleveland. They win this game tonight, they're going to finish this thing off in Cleveland. It'll end up being a 5-game series. The only chance for the Guardians to make this series go deep and have a shot to win, they have to win tonight. Tonight's their best pitcher, Bivey. After this, their rotation is in shambles, right? They don't have the experienced bodies to cover the 3rd inning through the 7th inning till they get the ball to their top high leverage relievers. They don't win tonight, they're up against it.
So it looks like you have the Yankees, and it looks like you have the Mets. You wanted it. We talked about it at the beginning. Subway Series. As of right now, we make a prediction every episode. Who's winning that series if we get there in the Big Apple? Is it the Mets?
The Mets.
Or is it the Yankees?
It's the Mets, because I think the starting pitching, the left-handed starting pitching, the one Achilles heel of the Yankees, they haven't hit left-handed pitching very well this year. Manaea, Quintana, and Peterson could give the Yankees a lot of problems. I'm thinking the Mets are winning the whole thing.
Wow. If you would have told a Mets fan back in May that they were going to be in the running for a World Series, I don't think they would have believed you. And now we're sitting here, and Dan Plesac thinks it. Dan, this has been awesome. We're going to wrap it up soon. But just for the audience listening, how does your job really change now as we enter the Final Four and this chaotic time in a good way for Major League Baseball?
It's easier now, Chase, because I'm not worried about 750 players in 30 teams. You got 4 teams, 3 of them, everybody, they're household names. The only team you have to do a little bit of homework on is the Guardians. This is the fun time of the year. Every pitch is big. Most of the games are close. I'll be glued to Game 2 tonight, see if Garrett Cole is all the way back, if he's what he was in Kansas City. If he pitches around Jose Ramirez and doesn't give him much to hit, I think the Yankees are in good shape and they win Game 2.
It'll be very exciting. Dan Plesac will be sure to check out what all the things you're doing at the MLB Network. We appreciate you coming on today. And we
Chase, let's do it again next week. I'm ready.
Let's do it again. We'll talk privately just about different scheduling things. But the audience, I hope you guys did enjoy. We will see you next week with Dan Plesac to preview that will be right around the time of the World Series. So stay tuned for that and all the things that we're scheduling. This was the Tuesday edition of Monday Madness, talking baseball with Dan Plesac of the MLB Network. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Chase.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Signing off alongside the MLB Network Analyst and 3-time MLB All Star, Dan Plesac. I'm your host, Chase Coburn. We will see you next time right here from Chase's Sports News. Thanks for tuning in.